Hi, good afternoon. This is John Firth, and I'm here with John Windsor, a good friend of mine who also, like me, became an entrepreneur at the age of 50, specifically a coach. Well, not at the age of 50, but after 50. Hence the title of our LinkedIn Live event, Over 50 and Suddenly an Entrepreneur. What happens when your entire career and professional life changes dramatically for whatever reason? One, because you don't want to do it anymore, or the people who are hiring don't want you anymore. And you have to make a dramatic change. And usually that means you have to go independent, whatever that may mean. But whatever it means is you're a solopreneur or an entrepreneur, meaning you don't have an organization behind you. You have what you build. And so we would like to address a bunch of topics today, tell our personal stories. But I want to just leave you with a thought. We'll start with a thought. A study published in the New England Journal of Medicine found that at age 60, you reach the top of your potential, and this continues into your 80s. So I'll now ask John to introduce himself, maybe make some comments about that study, and then tell us his story of what led him up to become an entrepreneur over 50.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. I'm John Windsor. I'm a coach, executive coach, team coach, personal and life coach, retirement coach, just a coach, based in Boulder, Colorado. Coaching
But
is
not
my
a football coach. You're not a football coach.
not a football coach, though I did coach my kids' soccer teams for
There you
almost
go.
10 years. But sorry, that just hijacked me.
Sorry.
Coaching, no, that's okay. Coaching is my sixth career, having been in order a Broadway actor, an MBA, and an international marketing executive in New York and London, a novelist, back into business and ended up as VP of marketing for a Silicon Valley startup, moved to Boulder, which is where my entrepreneurial life started, first as a presentation coach. Then I had my own software development business, and now I am a coach. And so I've had lots of transitions, and I know the process well. And I've had some interesting stories that I'll relate in our session today.
And when did you first become an entrepreneur? Definition being is you're not fitting into somebody else's organization. You're
Right.
actually creating, whether it's just one person or many people.
Just shy of my 50th birthday.
Okay.
So I was doing presentation and communication consulting and coaching, and started blogging, ended up as one of the top 5 bloggers on presentations and communications. Got seized by the development of apps for mobile devices, particularly the launch of the iPad. And I stopped the presentation work and built this organization. I ended up with a very popular app for better, faster, fewer meetings that had thousands of buyers at a premium price in 81 countries. And then when I tried to extend it to a SaaS app, software as a service, that was a long and painful experience that I ultimately shut down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. We'll probably go back to that. I have two clients who have SaaS businesses, and when it works really well. When it doesn't work, it really doesn't work.
It hurts. Yeah.
Yes. So, we probably will talk about failing and pain at some point.
Yep.
But very quickly, I'll tell you my personal story, which is I also started out in the arts. I was a music composer. Talk about hard work with no money to show for your efforts. But I was at the age of 20. I would say that was when I was being entrepreneurial. Was I an entrepreneur? I don't know, but I was being entrepreneurial, which meant I was kind of taking any job to pay the bills, but I was doing my own thing. My issue is that I knew it wasn't sustainable. But I also thought if I'm going to do it at all, I'll do it at the age of 20, which is kind of interesting because that points to a certain mindset about age. As I figured, when you're 20, and this is how my mindset went, you have a lot of energy. You don't really need a lot. It's kind of bootstrapping stuff. It's kind of fun. Yeah. And then I did my MBA, mostly because I had to pay my bills, or I wanted to be able to pay my bills, and then became basically an investment banker, then became a consultant. and pretty much followed that all the way until my 50s, when I became CEO of the trade association for the industry, the Association of Management Consulting Firms, which is cool because I surrounded myself with a lot of the leaders in the consulting industry. So it was very heady. It was sort of confirmation of a certain amount of status in the industry. But then things started to unravel. And it started unraveling because of mindset. And you'll hear in a second that so much of my issues have been mindset issues, that that I didn't own anything. It was a nonprofit. I wanted to be able to own my what I was doing. And so I thought to myself, I had been a consultant, always in the back of my mind thinking, if I go independent, thank God I'm a consultant, because that's one of the easier professions. Not knowing that when it came time to do it, and it did not start off well, because the frustration I increasingly felt running this association on multiple levels ended up in a very public resignation that was building up over a lot of time, basically talking to all the senior leaders in the consulting industry to basically go F themselves, thinking I had kept the control of the situation, when indeed just the opposite happened. But I did have one thing that popped in my mind and has stayed with me for the last 9 years, which is I want to stay as independent as possible without bankrupting myself.
Yep.
And that shows you the power of creating a mission statement like that. In this case, it wouldn't leave me, because that's exactly what's happened. Now, one of the issues I'm thinking about now is that's an awfully small vision to have. And so the question that we'll be talking about later is, how do you actually set a goal for yourself? Are they good goals? And are they worthy goals? And again, if you commit yourself to something, if you want something, be careful what you ask for.
Right.
Good. So we're going to go into the first topic in a second. But again, I just want to let you know that you can find us on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch. These are our names on LinkedIn. You should just watch that John Windsor is a coach, because there are a lot of John Windsors. And unexpectedly, there are a lot of John Firths. And I think I'm a business advisor is the first thing that comes up. But that's probably the easiest way to get back to us for questions, for conversation, maybe even to talk to us a little bit about what we do and in your situation as well. So we'll go to the second part. And again, this is over 50 and suddenly an entrepreneur. That's for people who are realizing that their career at any age, as they knew it, and by career, I mean business, the main focus of your professional life has changed, and you have to change with it. So let's start with our mindset and expectations. Why don't you explain to our viewers, John, how would you describe, first of all, your mindset when you made those decisions, and what exactly were your expectations, and were they fulfilled?
Yeah. I think about mindset in this realm having kind of two paths. One is you want to make the change. And we moved away from Silicon Valley, and I left my well-paying job to move to Boulder for quality of life reasons. At the time, our sons were 3 and 5. Silicon Valley was just ridiculous. So we moved there, and I needed to find something to do. So in a way, I was kind of forced to, but I was anxious to start to, as you talked about, spread my own wings. So that was good. But I've also faced it where when I realized I needed to shut down my software business, I was forced into, again, figuring out something to do. It was particularly painful because by then I was into my 60s. My wife thought the only job that I could get was a bus driver. And so she kept saying, well, you could be a bus driver. Why don't you go apply? And I'm like,
I thought of that too. Taxi driver in New York.
Yeah,
Every now and then I think,
yeah.
you know what? It wouldn't be so terrible.
Yeah. But I just knew there was so much more that I could do. And though I hadn't found it exactly, and because I'd had so many transitions in my life like this of reinventing myself, it's like, just hang in there, keep throwing stuff against the wall to see what sticks. And finally coaching appeared, and a perfect synthesis of all these things. So for mindset, number one, going in, are you looking forward to this, or are you resistant? I mean, you've been forced into it.
In some
Um,
cases, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, I don't know, force, but sometimes you have no other options, or
right.
it's at the moment really the only option that you can conceive of because getting a job at 53
Right.
sometimes is very hard.
Good distinction. Yep. Um, so, and then what we want to do then in that kind of scenario is make sure that deciding to become an entrepreneur and not just go get another job and a paycheck, you need to have a certain collection of beliefs about yourself, about your opportunities, about your ability to plunge into something new and to not let ageism, which we'll talk about in a minute, to not let ageism uh, deter you from all this stuff
Or sabotage yourself.
or sabotage yourself. Exactly.
And so when you got started, what was your expectation? Did you have, like me, a mission statement? I mean, literally, I couldn't get away from that. I mean, it was a vision. It was everything. I was surprised. And that's how I made changes. I always made changes because I suddenly had a vision that was so compelling, I
Yep.
couldn't shake it. Going
Yep.
to my MBA, doing investment banking originally, moving to Europe, there was always some sort of compelling reason that I couldn't shake
Yes.
for, good
That
or bad.
that that is a glorified place to be, and what we all wanna get to. And when we get to that point where it's so sharp that you could write a mission statement or you could take a pen and draw it,
Mhm.
you are well on your way to being able to make a viable business. But that doesn't mean that we should just kind of sit and wait and twiddle our thumbs for voices to come down from the
Yeah.
heavens and say, "Here's your business." So trying different things, taking incremental steps is a great way.
Uh-huh.
I have in my practice as a coach, and I wrote a book roughly on this theme, uh, and that guides people through the process of doing brainstorming and trying some things out to see not like, is this the thing, but what really grabs your curiosity? And when you can find those threads and you start pulling them or you follow them, lots of times you can ultimately get to that point that you've been lucky enough to have several times, John, of going, oh, this is it.
Well, it's interesting because in my case, um, I was very, what's the word? I guess ambitious. I had set myself certain goals. They're very concrete. Um, I was not an easy person. I guess I don't know if I was stubborn, but I certainly always had a strong opinion,
Hmm.
and that's came from my grandparents mostly, but my parents as well. I mean, they were very ambitious people, and I was the oldest son. So for me, I think it was natural that I would be propelled into something. Um, the problem was when suddenly I was left there and that power, that energy that I once had suddenly is gone, because it's not like this last 9 years have been propelled by visions and mission statements. I had this one overriding mission statement. My visions scared the shit out of me, to be absolutely honest. They did, because it
That's
was like,
great.
yeah, they were like, I could live on a shack, all the things that went against everything my life had been about. It
Yep.
had all been about achievement and so forth. And then I had done this one thing that sent my mind in a tailspin, and I think part of it was my lack of confidence. And then what we'll talk about in a little while is the energy levels when you get older do change, especially for men. Not that it gets better or worse, but it changes, and you have to adapt yourself. But as we just heard from the Journal of Medicine, I do feel like I'm smarter. I'm more confident. All the good things about what makes somebody successful
Yep.
and happy are definitely more in place than they ever were. But it was a journey. So we talk about expectations, or let's say the mindset was, I'm going to do this. It's almost like my whole career had been waiting for the time when I had to or wanted to become independent.
Yep.
So I was all positively, I thought this was going to be another one of those things that'll happen, of course, and
Yep.
it didn't.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that is when the things started to get really difficult for me. That
Yeah.
old way of just going for it just somehow wasn't working. I had been warned because I was a consultant. Consultants have a very definitive way of showing up and ways of being, and their skill
Hmm.
sets are much different. And I didn't want to do that anymore. I wanted to take the best part of that, which was to work with people on a very personal level. And so my expectations were a little unclear.
Yeah.
So, and that's also what's happened. The doubts come in a lot of the doubts. And that's when I started on a journey, which you and I talked about last night, which was to know myself better.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are frightened by that, especially people who are hyperachievers like me, is because you start scratching at this wonderful sheen of glory you've wrapped yourself into, which really ends up being a prison than anything. And it's hard for, at least it was for me, to finally get down to brass tacks, admit failure, admit that I wasn't the persona I had built. And that was really the hard part for me. And that was all a mindset issue.
Yeah.
So we're going to take another break. You're watching Over 50 and Suddenly an Entrepreneur. And we have here a note from, I hope I say your name correctly, Kojenwa Moit. She says, Colorado, exclamation point.
Yes.
I love Colorado. That's one of the first trips I took with my father because he loved to hike. But again, we are John Windsor and John Firth. You can find us on LinkedIn. Just type in our name. The first thing you'll see after mine is business advisor, and John will say coach, but you should recognize us from this event. So let's go to basically the main topic of what you and I are dealing with, which is ageism. And from my side, ageism is both the combination of reality, but like any kind of isms, so much of it starts playing out in our heads in ways that are sabotaging, which puts us into a negative mindset, sets off a whole bunch of beliefs that we've carried around with us. I'd like to talk about our latent ageism, that we're actually sabotaging ourselves because of our own mindset, which is why this is the next one. It immediately says you're older and this is what old people are supposed to do. And it's just the way it is. And you're going to lose energy. And remember how your grandfather was tottering around at the age of 70, although he was a professor pretty much until he was like in his 90s. So he was an example of someone who continued doing his life's work, even when he got older. But how do you view ageism, John?
Oh, well, that's really a center part of what I'm working on right now with a lot of clients is it's easier to spot ageism from an external source, right? Where people get turned down for jobs. And it's illegal to deny people employment or opportunity based upon age, but it happens all the time. Sometimes people are aware that they hear it from others in comments that they make, but so often as an individual, we don't notice it, saying, oh, I'm old. I'm too old. You're too old to do blah, blah, blah. And each one of those little declarations of being old is, it's like death by 1,000 cuts. It's just these little stabs. Yep. And they all serve to, it actually impacts our health. And we can get back to that. There's a startling statistic about it. And it just kind of limits our opportunities. I mean, one of my clients.
But is it in our heads more, or
that's
is it
the most
reality?
significant part of it? Absolutely, 100%. The stories we've been fed since we were children, and in books, in movie and TV, and just comments, and how older people are hidden away, and it's changing. But for anybody who was born in the 80s or earlier, it's a very present thing. No. So we need to stop it. And the thing is that there's no functional limit in terms of age where you can't do something. Stories are rife of people into their 90s or 100s, competing in sports. There are people who've created businesses different than they did before in their 60s, 70s, 80s. It's a remarkable time to create new things because younger people have what's called fluid intelligence, where, they maybe pick up on some ideas a little faster. But as we get older, we have acquired intelligence where it's synthesized. And we're better at making decisions and a host of other things. So it's the more that we can keep ageism at bay, the better the more likely we are to improve our chances of doing
Yeah.
spectacular things.
And by meaning putting it at bay is, I just went through a course with a group called Positive Intelligence. It's started by somebody from Stanford School of Business, Shazar Chamin. And that really, at the age of 62, really answered a lot of my questions. The fundamental one being is what's going on in my head. And I always sort of knew my head was, full of saboteurs and what have you. But to actually then see them on paper and experience them through these exercises, it was a fundamental shift at the age of 62. So the other thing is that myth about old dogs can't learn new tricks. Yeah, you can make that a reality. If that's what you think, that'll be reality. But the reality is, if you're open and vulnerable and desiring of a great further life, you're going to do things that are going to force you to shift your mindset and to think differently. And so ageism is a mindset, I think, more than anything else, but it is reality. But according to the study, the average age of Nobel Prize winners is 62 years old. The average age of presidents of prominent companies, by that I think Fortune 5000 probably, in the world is 63 years, which was really rather surprising. It doesn't mean you become president, but it means you've probably been president. But this also implies that there are some people, and we know people like Sumner Redstone was 80-something when he finally stepped down. Now, he was chairman of the board, but clearly companies are run increasingly, I would say, by older people.
Look at Warren Buffett.
Yes,
he's like 90.
Yeah, and he's still going
and Charlie
strong.
Munger.
Exactly. Yeah.
Still going strong.
And we have two presidents who, in succession, who were over 70. I think Reagan was the first one, and that was a shock to the system. And now it's obviously kind of commonplace. The average age of the pastors of the 100 largest churches in the USA is 71. The average age of the popes is 76 years. So that just goes to debunk. And the New England Journal of Medicine is a very respected, very research-intensive journal. So I would say, you can quibble with some of the numbers, as I have with a few people who I talked to last night, but it is a proof that there are major things that happen that people can make happen well into the 70s and 80s.
Yeah. Turning 50 is not, or 60 or 70 is not a sign that you should step to the side.
No, just the opposite, according to this, that the best years of our lives are between 60 and 80 years. Yeah. And in many ways, when I stop sabotaging myself, I do have to admit I'm getting to do what I want to do, how I want to do it, and with the people I want to do it. And that was more than anything else I could not have said that until I was 53. Yeah. We're going to talk now in a second about money, because that's the factor. But before we do that, I just want to say this is the LinkedIn Live event Over 50 and Suddenly an Entrepreneur. And I'm sitting here with John Windsor. And you can find us on LinkedIn just by typing in our names. And after my name, you'll see Business Advisor. After John's name, you will see Coach. So that that's us, because I think there's at least 10 or 15 of me and probably the same number of John, people with my name, which is kind of fascinating because I don't know anybody else named John Firth, but I know there are a lot out there. So let's go to the topic of money.
Yes.
So, and I'll kick this off by saying that, I made very good money as a consultant. I also worked really hard. I was not known for being soft. When I started this trajectory of being a coach, I had to get comfortable with the soft side of my personality, which was there, but I had hidden it. And I had a former employee, when I told him I was doing this and said, I'm dealing now with soft factors and how powerful they can be when you get it right and how hard it is sometimes to figure it out. He said, wow, well, you were never soft. So, but the problem is, you talk about beliefs or mindsets. My mindset was, you're tough, you're a big businessman, you're aggressive, go out there and you make a lot of money. And I made a lot of money. So now, unfortunately, I've had a reinforcement now that I'm doing what I really, really want to do. And quite honestly, I think I always wanted to do this work. I remember reading about it. I attended my first self-improvement seminar when I was 25. And at that moment thought, wow, if I could be that guy doing this, that really is, there was this feeling I should be doing this. but I was worried about the money. Well, guess what? That carried itself forward. So financially, I'm definitely struggling. My cash flow is not what it used to be. I'm dipping into savings. Fortunately, I have a lot of them, but I don't think that's uncommon. And I think part of it is mindset, but part of it is also I chose a profession, coaching, which is not traditionally like an investment banker or so forth. It's time and it's clients that you have to market to. And there are moments where I'm okay with that because I'm happier, in true sense of the word, professionally. But if I live to be 90 and I'm gonna for the next 28 years be having every year worry about my cash flow and so forth, that will definitely be exhausting, if you will. But what about you? What's your relationship to money and how has it played out as an entrepreneur?
I certainly had a long period. My first career, I was an actor in New York, and then for a little while in LA. And I never made a lot of money, but I was so caught up in pursuit of just the love and the joy of creating and acting and all of that, okay, and I didn't really think, I've never had long horizons about even I need this or that or the other, and somehow I've gotten by. And I
By the way,
finally
that's
got
my
out.
story too. That's good because in my
Yeah,
20s, I was a composer and I was teaching English in Germany, doing a lot of things to make money. But
yeah,
I never had this sense like doom was around the corner. It was always
yeah,
like, I'm going to get by. I'm never going to want. There's always
yeah,
something, overriding
yeah.
mindset.
Yeah. And then I finally got out of acting for a whole bunch of reasons, part of which was money, and ended up in business school. And I was in LA at the time. I moved back to New York, was doing really well, got transferred to London, doing even better, met my wife there. We moved to Silicon Valley for her job.
Mm-hmm.
Later, I went back into the workforce in Silicon Valley and ended up as VP of marketing for a well-funded startup and
Mm-hmm.
making a lot of money, but couldn't afford a house, on the peninsula,
Yeah, it's
and
expensive.
and ultimately lost it and said, "Look, for 300 or $400,000, we could buy a house in Boulder, Colorado, and I could commute." And instantly, the plan went into action. So we've always
Mhm.
and my wife's a professional person, and she's made good money, so we've gotten by. And yeah, we don't have enough money for either of us to just never work again, but neither of
Right.
us would want to do that, right? I'm so fascinated by the work that I'm involved in. So, I just kind of trust that the money's going to be there, and we have investments, and we're managing them really well. So that's a wonderful buffer, which kind of creates the space. But more specifically about being an entrepreneur and having to tap into your own funds. When I got the idea for this software business, for this app for meetings,
Mm-hmm.
uh, my wife said, "Okay, you can spend 25K to get this thing built." I don't have any coding skills, so I had to have somebody do it,
Right.
and it took off. It was the number one app for business in the App Store for iPad for a month,
Oh, really?
and more than
Congratulations.
made back the initial investment. And everybody was clamoring for, "Oh, I want to be able to have it on my laptop as well, and this and that and the
Mm-hmm.
other." And could you add this and that and the other? There was a lot of enthusiasm about it. So I plunged into trying to create a SaaS version. Um, and that supposedly was going to cost $28,000 and take 3 months. And it cost $70,000 and took 2 years and 3 months. And by then the market
Mm-hmm.
had changed and everything else. And so I shut it down. I was not going to throw money after it just because I built it, and it was really painful. So for me, the issue about money and being an entrepreneur is be clear, whatever you're going into, that you either have the funds or that you have a source. If you're trying to get VC funding, which is a whole other topic, and I went down that path for more than a year. Um, so uh, make a lot of little bets. And
Okay, that's actually a really good way to say it because among my client base, I actually once had a member of my Vistage group who was 75 at the time. Had some savings, but not significant ones, and the business was basically kind of his little nest egg. Well,
yep,
the problem was is that the industry had changed dramatically in the 10 years preceding. Lots of consolidation. He was a small business where all the businesses that surrounded him that were equally small had been bought up. Suddenly he was
yeah,
fighting against colossal giants. Had he sold the business 10 years, 5 years beforehand, he probably would have had a nice nest egg.
yep,
Unfortunately, all he could get was $300,000 for the business when he finally sold it. And one of the issues I think he finally was cognizant of is that it was hard for him to justify making any kind of serious investment. And he knew the investment that was needed
yep,
to really ramp it up. I mean, we're talking millions of dollars because he
yep,
probably would have to do some sort of an acquisition strategy or do something dramatically
yep,
different.
yep.
And he made the decision that this wasn't in the cards. So I think there's two overriding concerns with money. First one is that you cannot necessarily believe, you shouldn't believe you're going to make lots of money. You might as well already come with the belief and the understanding that there's a possibility you're going to run through your savings. So you kind of have to know. The good news is most of us by this age understand finance, which a lot of younger people don't. They think money grows on trees. We understand that it doesn't, or we may not find that tree as fast as we did before. And so you got to know how you're doing it and where you're getting the money from and what justifies it. In my case, what was very interesting is I saw the stock market. I had enough gut feeling to know that we were still on a run, and we were. So I thought when I take the between 25 and 50,000 out of my savings, it easily got replenished.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my mind, and it worked. Now,
Yeah.
I think I overspent on some things. Now, with the stock market correcting, I've been in sheer hell because I kept thinking, this is it. The money train's over. What am I going to do now? And the good news is I've now rebuilt my business quite well. It gave me the energy. But yesterday I was looking at my portfolio because I'm always afraid to look at it. And the number was so high in the face of everything. And I called
Wow.
my wealth manager and he said, oh yeah, I kept you in cash. I just never bothered telling you. He said, you're talking to a very brilliant person. I said, Michael, I know you're smart, but he said, no, he made himself independent after being part of a larger group at the age of 42. So he's not 50.
Mm-hmm.
And the result was he had to shift all the portfolios right when everything was melting down. This was 3 months ago. So he put all of his clients in cash instead of taking the money from Schwab or where it was sitting and doing a 1043, I think it's called, or 34 to Fidelity. He decided to put everybody in cash. And then he knew everybody's situation. So mine was such that he believed very strongly I shouldn't invest. And he was right. So now suddenly my whole world is money. I've got money I didn't know I had, and I'm not going to spend it. Anyways, we're going to move to the next topic really quickly, and that is planning. And we've touched on it a bit. But John, why don't you tell us how you've been planning and what it looks like compared to your former career, former professional life?
Oh, boy. So that's a great distinction because in my former professional life, I had a particular role, right? I was head of global marketing for a company in London. I was ultimately VP of marketing for a company in Silicon Valley. You have a certain level of autonomy, or, especially if you're good at presenting ideas to the people above you in the chain. But there's a whole infrastructure, there's a whole company dynamic that's already there, and you're finding your place within that.
You're not. You didn't create it. You have the structure given to you.
Yeah, and can you make the most of that, and what have you? When you are an entrepreneur, you're doing everything, right? I mean, hopefully you get people around you to share the load, but all the pieces require attention. So it becomes a
And more than
process of
attention, it's actually learning to do some things that you never in your life thought you were going to have to do.
100%, 100%. Yeah. So the thing that I would do and that I recommend to people when I talk to them about this is to go top down from the big picture of what do you want to accomplish, uh, and and things like what's your market like, and who's your primary audience, what's the story that you have, how do you meet their needs, and from that you then start to go down the chain. My camera here. Um,
Mm.
for what are the major milestones? What's your 5-year plan? What's your 1-year plan? What's your 90-day plan? And you
Mhm.
reset and you reset.
Right, right.
What are the resources that you need, that you can't do yourself? And how can you get people on board so that you don't have to do all this alone?
Well, and you bring up an interesting distinction, which is I'm not really an entrepreneur. I'm a solopreneur. Now, I do have somebody who helps me with marketing, and I have a virtual assistant. But my intention never was to rebuild an organization. Although there's a side of me that keeps saying, with everything you've learned as a coach in the last 6 years, can you imagine what a killer CEO you would be? Um, it could still happen, though I'm not actively looking because I do love the work I'm doing. But there's a side of me that would love to put this more into practice and just helping others be successful. But so my issue with planning is it was very easy to tell other people as a consultant or help them plan. And by that, I mean organizational planning, growth of a large business. I was head of international for discovery, and we had very involved planning sessions, but they were quote unquote more reliable. They had to be reliable. I mean, people's bonuses, people's careers were dependent on them making a plan they could stick to.
Hmm.
Problem I've been having is the best laid plans. Let's face it, COVID, I threw everything out. I had
Yeah.
to. I was,
Yeah.
clients were leaving, they were freaking out. New clients came suddenly. And any planning I thought I'd done just went right out the window. Right out the window. I mean, there was nothing, and you never knew what was going to happen next. And I didn't really feel like I had to pivot or wanted to pivot. Some of my clients who were in very, very distressed industries like hospitality were doing great pivoting, but that's because they had an organization. Unfortunately, they got the money from the government PPP and idle loans and what have you. Um, but they still had to plan because of an organization. When you're on your own or really small, it's really hard, one, to do planning, but more importantly, I have a real issue of, I mean, I make plans, very simple plans. I want to have this many clients and this revenue. But for the most part, if I don't hit them, the only person who gets mad at me is me.
Yeah.
When you're in an organization, you got your boss, you got you have a lot of people who are going to make it very clear that, if you didn't plan this and it happened, that maybe you're not the leader that you should be or are. So your
Yeah.
feet are held to the fire. My planning is very fluid, very like a piece of Play-Doh, kind of fold and mold it however I want. I can
Yeah.
reset expectations every day if I wanted to, and then sometimes I do. But I find it hard to do it. I can't use the traditional planning models by any means.
Right. Right.
And I think that's
And
important too, to be able to
yeah.
say that, because you have to also be open and vulnerable and open to opportunities that you didn't even know existed. So
Yeah.
what were you going to say?
And there's a great transition in that to a comment from Michael Piccoli about failure and how
Wait,
uh,
Michael?
I see his comment on the screen. I don't know him yet. Hi,
Oh,
Michael.
he's coming. He's watching us. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't
So
even see that. Yeah. Hey,
re
Michael.
I
Yeah.
have to read part of this. Repositioning failure is acceptable, and part of the process is critical to mental health and keeping your foot on the gas. But in the moment, it's stressful.
Mhm.
100%, Michael.
Mhm. Michael is
Um,
my wealth manager, who I was just telling about.
ah,
Michael, I don't know if you heard, but I was just singing your praises of how you put me in the cash, and what a fabulous moment that was yesterday
yeah,
when I saw I had a lot more money than I thought. So hats
yeah.
off to you. I'm glad you could join us.
So indeed, we need to reframe failure. Failure is required. The thing is, you want to do it in a manageable way, right? This has been very present in the startup communities for a long time about celebrating failure. And we could have a debate about that, but
Mhm.
allowing for things that aren't successful is really the path to finding what is successful. If you're only going to hold on tight to this has to work in this way and what have you, oh, it's going to be a miserable existence.
It's gonna exactly one of the things coming back to mindset, and I didn't want to believe it when it first came up. In I'm a chair at Vistage. We have, which means I build groups of CEOs. We have about 10 or 15 of them in New York City, and it came out fairly early on that I was a controller, and half of me was saying, well, that's part of the reason, again, saboteur, part of the reason why I'm successful, is I keep things under control. But what they really were saying is you're going to miss out on so many opportunities, and you're really in scarcity mindset through the control thing. And that's when the planning had to kind of get modified, because it was I loved to plan because I was a consultant. And that's when I stopped dropping it a little bit and living more in the moment and looking at opportunities much more realistically, and also failure. Learning to fail has been really hard. I mean, I can't tell you how much my brain would sort of avoid that. Saying something was a failure would be a mistake, a bad decision. That wasn't as bad as saying it was a failure.
Yeah.
So, great. Well, we're running out of time. Again, you're watching Over 50 and Suddenly an Entrepreneur with my friend John Windsor and myself. You can find us on LinkedIn if you want to get in touch. So we're going to come to our final topic, and that is implementation and productivity, actually getting stuff done. And as a solopreneur, when you suddenly are only accountable to yourself, what does that mean in terms of your productivity and ability to get things done? So, John, any thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Not the number one, but one of the most important things in this scenario, and also for people that retire, is about your schedule, right? When you're working for somebody else, pretty much even if you have your own division, right? You know what your expectations are. You have those numbers you're supposed to hit. You have all these things that you have to do, right? When it's you deciding what you need to do or get to do, still with no kind of structure to it and no schedule, it's easy to get just lost in the eddies of life.
And nobody holding you accountable.
Nobody holding you accountable. Yes, except perhaps your spouse or partner or somebody like that.
By the way, I always like to say to people who are going, because I do work with CEOs who are lost their job, and a lot of them have to become entrepreneurs. I say, I just want to make you aware of the fact that your wife is going to decide what you do. It's you're going to do what you have to do.
Not always. I did not become a bus driver.
Well, yeah, I mean, at some point you do have a say. But it is true that wives in particular, and I've had several clients, both successful and unsuccessful in terms of making a transition. One in particular, I won't say what it was, but he got his next job as CEO in 3 months. It was like record time. And he was highly motivated. It was a joy to help him. But he afterwards said, it was his wife in no uncertain terms. And I won't tell you exactly what he told me, but because it was a little horrifying. But there was no uncertain terms. He had to get a job, or else things were going to really go crash and burn.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the things we should say about productivity also is, for men at least, our testosterone levels go down, and that is our source of energy. Whereas women don't necessarily. The estrogen that also begins to dissipate, but estrogen is for producing babies and for being a female. That's not as horrendous as when you're a male whose energy is. Testosterone is, we have, I think, as we get older, indeed, physical things that happen to us. Men do die before women do. Also, I find a lot of women are as productive and as forceful in their 70s as they were in their 30s and 40s. So that's a biological thing. I don't even think that's discussable, except the medical industry is finding testosterone replacements. There's a lot of work going on, specifically for men, but also for women, to keep us happy and productive, also to grow older. But what the study says, the Journal of Medicine, is an extensive, the most productive age is between 60 and 70. And I'm actually amazed at what I get done, not necessarily professionally, but almost every day I bake something. Sometimes it's 2 a.m, but in addition to everything else, because I find baking is a great way to just sort of focus on something else. It's kind of relaxing, believe it or not. Not always, but The second most productive stage of human being is from 70 to 80 years of age. So we're talking about productivity. And that points to a couple of things which we can discuss as our final point. And the third most productive stage is from 50 to 60. So clearly, again, comes back to what they found is that you're most productive between 60 and 80. And 50 to 60 is a close third or second place, whatever you want. I would say what we bring to the table is the ability to think. I think we're much better at looking honestly at stuff. And if we don't, we figure it out really quickly. We have an issue and we correct it. We're much more humble about ourselves, which allows us to be open and to consider all sorts of different paths. It becomes a problem when you have fixed beliefs that have gotten reinforced over the years, and to shake those. That's really, I think, the only big barrier to productivity, because when things don't pan out the way you thought they should go, because it's been like that for 30 or 40 years, it is easy to lapse into ennui, a little depression or so forth, and it's hard to pull yourself out. But otherwise, I think so much of what we bring to the table lends itself to being highly productive. We can focus, I can focus much better on things. I can prioritize much better. There are just so many things that compared when I was in my 30s, I just do much better. But one thing I can't do is I can't lift the weight level. Now I probably could if I put my mind to it.
Well,
but,
see,
that's
the interesting thing is a lot of people go, oh, well, I mean, my wife is Swiss and she
forgot to turn that off.
Musical entertainment here. My wife is Swiss, and I think she came out of the womb on skis, and still just manic skier and this and that and the other. And she's 60. She had a fall recently on a ski slope on, a double black diamond. And some people say, well, see, you're 60. You shouldn't be doing that.
Right.
And it's like, no, she just wasn't she wasn't conditioned enough, or she didn't have her ski legs enough to do it that fast on that challenging a run. And when you hear
which
about
can happen when you're 16 or 17 too, you cannot be in a
absolutely
condition.
Yeah. And you read about people, running marathons into their hundreds, right? Conditioning is a really big part of it. And okay, so we lose some testosterone. We figure out other ways around it. And to your thing about productivity, we get better at deciding where we need to put our focus and where we don't. Right. So there's a selectivity there that maybe we didn't have when we were younger. But from all the studies and things that I've looked at, and I researched this stuff like crazy, if you are properly trained, you can do most anything. And whether that is physical or whether it's like Peter Drucker, right? One of the legends of management philosophy. And from age 65 to when he died at like 94, he wrote like 29 books.
Oh my God, I didn't know so many.
10 of them in the last 9 years of his life. So thank God he didn't give up and go, well, I guess I've had my run, and
Because
I'm
the
getting
world
older
would've,
and I'm slowing down and da 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 da. He turned on the jets. It's incredible. So
yeah, I mean, in terms of writing books, I love to write. I published a book myself 3 or 4 years ago. It was hard work, but it was because I had never done it before. And, all my saboteurs were showing up. This is terrible. You're going to embarrass yourself, all that wonderful stuff. And I make it harder for myself. But the fact is we have a wealth of experience, knowledge, insight that we want to pass on. So actually the act of creating, once you get past the initial hurdles, is for me also very, very exciting. I enjoy it. It relaxes me. It makes me feel whole again because your brain is really firing off the sparks. So I think, in terms of writing per se, or creating things from your life's experiences, it flows much better than it ever did. And I always sort of knew that was going to happen. My grandfather was like, he wasn't Peter Drucker, but he was part of the Austrian economists. He was writing books up until the 90s as well. Wow. I don't think he wrote 29. I think maybe 5 or 6. Yeah. But for that, we aren't probably going to go out, most of us, and run the marathon, even with conditioning. It's not. I don't think at this age a lot of us have the will. Some of us do, but I
Yeah.
think there are things that become easier and nicer to do that we have tons of energy for and tons of productivity for, that we probably didn't have beforehand.
Yeah. But
So,
I mean,
anyways, yeah. Oh, sorry.
just one
Why don't you
last
say the
thing to
final
that
word?
thing
Yeah.
about, are we slowing down or not as we get older? Part of it is, yes, our bodies are aging. We can't necessarily do the things that we do, but there's a guy, Swiss British guy. I think he died a few years ago, named Charles Oigster, who
Uh-huh.
at 89, 85, 89, something like that, decided to start weight training.
Hmm.
And the pictures of him are extraordinary. I've never had arms like that. I used to do triathlons and
Yeah.
marathons. I was in the weight room all the time. I, it was stunning, and he was in his 90s with a chest full of medals that he'd won in competitions. This was
Oh,
when he
let's
was
hope. Yeah.
91. That picture was taken. His arms are up, and it's like, wow, scary.
Yeah, it is possible. No, but I think we also have to, when we do that, we have to take extra care with our nutrition, with our sleep,
Absolutely.
probably
Yep.
more than we had to. I mean, you have to do that. An Olympic athlete is, doing that already.
Yeah.
But I think just to get through life, we have to just be a little bit more cognizant, and we naturally do, of what
Yep.
we eat, how much we eat of it, how much exercise we get. But my trainer says that to me too. He said, John, you have the basis for a great body. You just don't work at it. But I have to admit, it's a choice I've made. Now,
Yeah,
unfortunately,
that's
my
fine.
choice is I've become such a good baker and just general cook that we had friends over, and one friend took a piece of my cake to her landlady, and the landlady now wants to buy a whole cake. So it's almost like whatever you decide you want to put your energy behind, there's no reason in the world why you can't be even more successful than
Yes,
before. And I
100%.
have toyed with the idea of becoming a baker. But that's a bigger leap of faith, I think, than being a coach. But
Yeah.
I have taken great joy in and these are hard. I do mostly French and European things. So there's technique, and you can make 5 batches of horrible eclairs like I did, and finally get it. So it's like training. It's just it's not, if anything, it's to make
Yeah.
yourself fat, not to make
Yeah.
yourself more lean. But yeah, I think that's, for me, proof that when you decide that's what you want to do, and it's usually based on some passion somewhere, you will become expert at it. Whether or not you make a career of it or make a lot of money doing it is a whole different question.
Right.
But I
And
actually
what are
think
your objectives? And yeah,
exactly. But I think you actually can achieve at excellence better at this age than at younger years, because also, if your financial situation is at least comfortable, you actually have time to
yep,
pursue a passion that you probably
yeah,
didn't.
yeah,
So I will never be a triathlon athlete. I'd be happy to have a little more chest, but boy, if I turned into a crackerjack baker.
that's awesome. Good for you. Yeah, yeah. For me, the signs are all positive about being over 50 and suddenly an entrepreneur. It's a great time to pursue something, and you have enough accumulated experience and wisdom that
Wisdom, yeah.
the business that you create today will be likely to be significantly more impactful than it would have been
Oh
20
yeah.
years earlier in your
Oh
life.
yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely. The impact thing. And that's just also because I think as you get older, you want to leave something behind. And the
yeah,
best way to leave something behind is to make an impact, a positive impact,
yeah,
and as many people as you can.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyways, this has been great.
Thank you. This has been fun.
We were afraid we wouldn't even be able to fill 30 minutes. Now it's almost an hour. But thank you, everybody who joined us.
Yes,
This
thank
video
you.
will be available, and I thank John, and I look forward to doing subsequent sessions with John. And
Yes.
we're sort of in the same wavelength about getting the word out, making an impact for those of us who are over 50 and struggling to figure out what they're going to do with their lives.
Yeah,
But it gets better, everybody. It does.
absolutely.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye bye.